Next item on the agenda, NCA 18-180. The law of the Mvskoke Creek Nation, repealing MCN CA Title 49, entitled Mvskoke Media, and creating a new Chapter 11 under MCN CA Title 16, entitled Mvskoke Media, and amending MCN CA Title 16, subsection 1-102H, entitled Department of Commerce, J, entitled Public Relations, and K, entitled Independent Statutory Executive Agencies. Sponsors Adam Jones.
Motion to adopt.
Motion to adopt by Representative Jennings.
Second.
Second by Representative Beaver. Discussion. Representative.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I know that there's a lot of concerns. I have received some calls today about this legislation, but I feel that it is still a good piece of legislation and to support it. I feel like that the media is, you know, it's not personal against the media, but I feel like the newspaper itself could have more positive issues on the nation and not so much negative issues with it. So that's one reason that I am supportive of it.
Thank you, Representative James. Chief Floyd.
I know that this also relates to two departments under the executive branch, and I know that we've been working with the council getting our budgets passed. We've been working on the executive branch to try to be more efficient in what we're doing and to be more coordinated. So we'll continue to work to do that. I know that we've got to be held just as accountable as anybody else. So regarding my aspects of it, we would, as proposed, would fall under the Department of Commerce. We do have accounts, revolving accounts for tourism and recreation, and there's in Mvskoke Media as well. So I think it fits there best under Commerce. So that's, I'll be prepared to respond accordingly.
Thank you, Chief Floyd. Any questions for Chief Floyd? Council? Representative Joel.
Chief Floyd, what discussions went into this legislation with the secretaries, managers, or these departments that you'd like to switch to?
Discussion we have has been with just the Secretary of Commerce. We've had ongoing discussions with public relations, as you know, regarding their budget and the concerns that have been expressed here in the hearings, both in, I think, August and October. So we continue to have those discussions, and try to make sure that those amounts are appropriate for what activities we have with tourism and recreation. It's really to coordinate the messages that we have. We have a lot of expenditures in advertising. We just want to make sure that we're getting the message out that we want, and to better coordinate that and to better utilize the resources that we have. So those are the discussions that I've had.
The sponsor is here, Mr. Adam Jones. My question would be, if the media board was to sit down and discuss this issue at this time in terms of hey, we feel there's much negative in the paper, or what direction can we go, can we compromise, what do you, whether we talk to the board about our concerns about the media, how they produce paper, we still at the same time have their independence. That was my question for the sponsor. He's not here tonight.
Thank you, Travis Scott.
Thank you, Speaker. I just have a couple of things. For one, I'm kind of curious as to what has changed to bring this legislation up, to bring this back to what we are proposing tonight, other than, I guess, some concerns is what I hear. I think this was changed back in 2015, if I remember right, when the council did the Independent Media Act, and I think in subsection 2 it kind of explains itself that it was created to be independent without influence of any political interest or interference. And I think, in my opinion, if we approve this, this is where we're going with that. I think this needs to be a little more thought out, addressed with the board, like Representative Huff said. So that's, I'm just curious what changes has brought this up to try to move this back.
Chief Floyd, would you like to respond?
Don't know quite understand the question, but could you restate the question?
I'm just curious, Chief, as to when this was approved in 2015 and up to date, what changes has brought the council to address this issue, other than the negativity, I guess, is what I hear. But in my opinion, we see that every day when we wake up to watch the news, regardless if it's at the tribal level, the state level, the federal level. I mean, that's all we see. I'm just curious as to what has derived this legislation to come about.
You know, just speaking just from the executive branch side, and looking at the media, I know this precedes me, so I don't know the full history, the origin of the bill, but you know, I think I've lived by the spirit of the independence of the media. I've not interfered with any story, tried to stop any story whatsoever, and will continue to be the same regardless of where it's at. I think there's certain standards that we've got to meet, and we'll continue to do that. So, you know, I think, again, I go back to the issues that we've been facing, is just trying to be accountable and being good stewards of the tribal money in everything that we do. This is, we've looked at other businesses, we've looked at in other pieces of legislation that you've passed and that we've worked with, and I see this kind of in the same vein. So, hope that answers your question.
Thank you, Chief. Thank you, Chair. Stop. Any other questions? Any other discussion? Representative Deere.
Does the media have input, I'm sorry, does the administration have input as to what the media prints
Currently?
now?
No. Representative Scott.
Yes, how would this dismantle the free press? I mean, it says, it would effectively dismantle free press protection in place of the Mvskoke media. How's it going to affect free press?
Which Costa, would you like to comment on that?
Yeah. The thing is, in the past, we've gotten word from officials that they would not touch and influence what we do. But the thing is, in the public trust, all of us can tell them that all day long. But if the structure and the law does not reflect that, then it's not really going to inspire confidence if that's the case. And I think if you look out there, there has been a crisis of confidence in this government from time to time. Sometimes we don't print the most flattering things, but we've always tried to be fair by our training, by NAJA and SPJ ethics, like I said. And honestly, that's the best we can do. But as far as taking the word of officials or whatever, that's the whole point of having free press in the U.S. Constitution. It's the reason we passed this. I'm afraid, and like I said when I talked about this in 2015, that if you didn't have an official tribal outlet to do this on behalf of the citizens, it goes back to stuff like Voices of Courage. People that throw out accusations with no attribution, or even putting their own name behind it, and there's no standards anymore, and that's what controls the public conversation. I know that we've printed stuff that some of you may have found alarming, but at least I can come, like today, and account for what I've done. If we get rid of that, that probably is no longer going to be the case. And one example I can point to, I haven't checked this recently, but I'll just come out and say it. Some of you may remember Voices of Courage. Last time I checked, they were out of business, and I'd like to take at least some credit for that. And I'd hate to go back and see that controlling the narrative for our citizens about what's going on with our government.
Scott. Thank you, Costa. Representative Freeman.
So will the what happened to the board, the media board? I mean, we have a media board, will it be a trade and commerce board oversight?
The current board as it is for media will no longer be, it will all be repealed.
So it's going under the Secretary of Commerce, but will it be will that be a
Chief Floyd?
Mr. Freeman, as it's written, there will be no, as you see in the act, the editorial board will cease to exist. It will come under the executive branch, under the administration, under the Department of Commerce.
Thank you, Chief. Any other questions, Representative Freeman? Roll call vote, please.
James Jennings,
Yes.
Thomasini Osborne. No. Darrell Proctor,
Yes.
Rufus Scott,
Yes.
Travis Scott,
No.
Dale Beaver,
No.
Pete Beaver,
Yes.
Patrick Freeman,
No.
Joyce Steer,
Yes.
Johnny Green,
Yes.
David Hill,
No.
Robert Hunt.
No.
Speaker, you have 6 in favor, 6 against.
6 in favor, 6 against. Speaker votes yes.
Speaker, you have 7 in favor, 6 against.
7 in favor, 6 against. That motion is adopted. Next item on the agenda will be announcements. Any announcements from council? Hearing none. entertain a motion.
Chief, of course, tonight, obviously an interesting agenda. A lot of people in caring about what happens, and a very close vote. Your ideas about the fact that a lot of people may feel that this ends free press at Creek Nation.
My thoughts about that?
Yeah.
I don't believe so. I think that it's premature to say that it ends free press. I think my record stands for itself. I've not interfered or tried to steer any story whatsoever by the independent media. I know that it's an independent agency. I've treated it just as if they were any other independent, and we'll continue to do that. I've inherited another part of the executive branch, but we'll continue to follow the mission. I think we look at the best interests of the citizens and what's the message that they need to get from Mvskoke Creek Nation as an official publication and as an official media outlet. And as I mentioned in the meeting tonight, we're working to make sure the existing parts of the executive branch does the same thing. It's a big nation. We get a lot of outlets. There's a lot of money being spent. I'm being asked to be accountable, and will continue to be accountable in managing the money, yet making sure that we have a good quality product for our citizens.
I guess my concern, or let's say a concern would be, you have done a fantastic job, just from my own personal dealings with you in media, but you're not going to be chief forever. I mean, we all know that. And this law very well is on the books. So what if another chief comes in? I mean, is there any concerns with that? I know you yourself believe in a free press. The next chief in line may not.
Yeah, I can't speculate what somebody in the future would do. My approach would be similar to what we're doing at some of the businesses of the Mvskoke Creek Nation, trying to set a foundation so that whoever may follow me will see that we have it well insulated so that we can continue and grow and prosper. That's what we're doing in other things. I've been in meetings all day in other aspects of our operation, and that's the same thing that we're doing there, is making sure that we're investing in something that's for the long term. And so I proceed to do the same thing here and hope that that we have it strong enough to be not vulnerable to any force that tries to change it.
Chief, last thing I'll ask you, the sponsor of the bill wasn't here tonight. A very close vote. It's broken, a tie broken by the speaker. You have veto powers as chief. Any plans to veto this bill if it's passed tonight?
Well, it's a tough one. I just, like others, the bill is written. I've reviewed it. I'll consider that, and then. But I know that this is a very pressing issue. Media outlets continue 24/7, so we won't have all the time to contemplate what to do.
Okay.
You know, I respect the National Council. I respect them when they made the decision in 2015, before I was in office. I know that they speak to a lot of people that are in the communities and among the nation a lot more than I do. So, you know, I will be looking for what are some of the things where we don't match up, just as I'm doing with public relations and tourism and recreation. I know that we can always improve, and so that's what I'm trying to work on here. Maybe handed another aspect of that operation in terms of media to work with. But I think we owe a quality product to all of our citizens, and by design it, that's what we'll work to do.
I got a question, Chief. What protections are in this bill to ensure that the executive branch won't bury a story or remove a story outside of your own administration? If another chief comes in and he decides an issue not to be covered or not to be printed, what protections are in this bill to ensure that that doesn't happen so that citizens see the truth?
Well, I think just as we do in healthcare, we have standards that we meet, and we follow those, and you know, they're accredited. I think we would apply the same standards in media that we would any other operation that we have. As mentioned, you know, we got the National Native American Journalists Association standards. We certainly want to comply with that.
But those aren't included in this bill.
They aren't.
They're not in this bill.
Accreditation is not included in the healthcare legislation, but there are standards that are known in the industry. We'll meet those and exceed those. That's what we've done in healthcare.
But what requirement is there to do it in the law?
The requirement would be mine as principal chief.
Sure. So if a different chief comes in and that chief doesn't share your view on it, there's no protections for the employees underneath of him in that situation from him saying, I'm going to do it a different way. Chief Floyd handled things this way, and I'm going to do it a different way. What would you say to citizens that, if you're pointing that?
My second question was
I hope that they would see that the volume of work that we've done in this administration and every aspect of the organization to assure that we bring in good people, that we retain good people, we give them the abilities to do the best job possible. And that's the standard that will hopefully prevail when my time is up.
But there's no legal protection, though. In the future, your administration has done a wonderful job. But a future administration, there's still going to be a Creek Nation and citizens in the future. What's there for them in that situation with this particular bill?
Well, you know, the nation's an at-will employer, but at-will doesn't mean that every day everybody's job is being threatened. As an example, myself, you know, I've already retired from one job. I've got this job, and this job will end at some point. We've got to bring in younger people, have them be developed to be the leaders of tomorrow. And so some of the people we may have seen in the past will not be here in the future, including myself. And so we've got to be able to make sure that this tribe is strong enough to withstand anything, and that the strength and the training and the professionalism of the people will prevail in any situation.
Would you consider an amendment to our different legislation that included these journalistic standards and protections for the employees of the press, but still moved the oversight of the money management or wherever the snafu that's happening? Would that be something that you would consider? Because right now, currently, the bill as it stands is in a position where a new chief or tomorrow, we could all be removed and coverage can be taken down, coverage can be edited after the fact. There's zero protections legally for any of the employees, and the citizens aren't, you know, as far as the quality aspect of the product. The citizens won't see anything that's not aired and that's not printed. So if the chief, whoever it may be, says, well, this story can't be aired or this story can't be printed, they wouldn't see that it's a bad story. That's kind of, you know, Sterling was pointing out the issue with Voices of Courage. Things were happening at the nation that everyone knew about, but none of it was being printed and none of it was being shown to the citizens because those legal protections weren't there. So what would you say to citizens when they point that out?
Well, I would say first, give it time. I'm not opposed to the amendment at any time. I'll review it. But at the same time, we could be omitting every piece of legislation of the nation for every program, say housing and child welfare, things like that. And I think that, as time goes along, everyone should be confident that we're meeting the needs of what we should be doing in terms of standards and the product that we put out and produce and communicate to our citizens. That's who we're ultimately responsible to. And so I think that I don't see us going off a cliff here and going into unknown waters and just casting everyone aside. I know there are times that presently in the executive branch, as you know, we've got pending cases in courts where we're not able to say things because we don't want to jeopardize any standing we have in any court. Other than that, I think our people are pretty much free to do whatever they want in their programs. They abide by the federal regulations when they're applicable, the tribal regulations when they're applicable, and I just, my job is to continue to make sure that we do that.
Yeah. I mean, your administration has been great with that, and I'm a long-term employee at the nation, and I've seen what the impact of not having any protection can be. Currently, before this bill passed and before you sign it, the media does have a protection because we're considered an independent statutory agency. So before any employee can be fired, that decision has to be made by the editorial board. So this legislation is going to dissolve that editorial board and it doesn't exist anymore. And then you or the Secretary of the Nation or anyone like that will have the direct ability to come in and fire us the next day. Do you have any plans to do that?
No, this time I don't.
Do you know if anyone below you has any plans to come in and liquidate the department?
No, the only thing I have knowledge of this time is going to be under the Department of Commerce.
So what can citizens expect going forward from tonight? What will they see as far as the media?
What our citizens will expect is continuity and the goal of having a unified message across all parts of the nation to the citizens.
What if
in the meeting today, we have different messages that we're trying to reconcile so that when they see the messages coming from the nation, they understand that it corresponds with something else that we may be doing, and it's a job to do because we're large strong.
Will negative news still be reported? If a councilman commits a crime or someone in the executive branch commits a crime, will that still be reported?
Well, here's what I would say is we go back to the standards that are in place, the journalistic standards of judgment that you use at the present time.
Well, but the person who would make the decision whether it's published would be the chief.
Would be the manager of the program.
Well, if the person above them decided that they didn't want it published, they could go to that manager and give them an instruction: publish this or you're fired, or don't publish this or you're fired. And right now, previously to this bill passing, we had the protection of the editorial board. But now there's nothing to stop, for instance, the Secretary of the Nation coming down to our department saying, you guys aren't going to air anything you shot last night. And if you do, you're fired. And that would be totally legal, and there would be nothing to stop them from doing that.
Well, I would just say that be patient. We're going to see that if we sign it. I don't think anything that we've done to date in the administration is anywhere near that. So we have other big things that we've dealt with.
If something like that,
fair.
Could you give a guarantee to the citizens that if something like that happens, you'll stop it?
What I will do to the citizens is the same commitment that I make. Is that, I'll stand up and defend any decision that I make. I'm responsible for that. They voted me to do that. I'll do the best job I possibly can.
Do you
working for the people and for their needs?
Do you think it's in the best interest of the citizens if the protections for the employees of the press are removed?
The protections of the employees comes under our policies and procedures of the human resources that are under review.
But the Creek Nation is a right to work place, so you have total authority over when you fire and hire an employee.
That's correct, but we've not used that in any capricious manner or anything. I don't intend to.
I think the main concern is, sir, that I would say personally, again, I don't have one speck of me that believes that your administration would do such things because of what we've gone through. But I'm talking about this is law now, and will we have to go back and change the law again, because we may have a chief after you that really does feel like, I'm going to tell the press what they can and can't. It seems like we have to go back and get independent press and then get protections. And why don't we just keep protections that we've already got in place? I don't understand. In this instance, I don't understand where the reasoning for this to be implemented outweighs the reasoning for keeping it in place. I believe is what I think I'm trying to, yeah.
Well, and I think my position is to understand what the National Council is reflecting, you know, and I'm going to respect what they do, because, like as I said earlier, they're out there among the communities, among the people, a lot more than I can be, and you know, I need to hear from them, and so you know, that's. I'll continue to do that. Should things need to be modified, I wouldn't be shy in bringing those issues up.
Chief, you, in your comments tonight, and you have been completely hands-off with the press, have respected the bill yourself, and in your comments tonight, you indicated that this was a lot more about a continuity, a consistency with the way, how we're being stewards of our money, things like that. We had a councilman in front of everyone blatantly say, this is being proposed because of negative news in the newspaper. I don't think that's a good look for the tribe. I wonder if you also feel that that's not a good look for the tribe, that the motivation behind this bill is there's negative news in the newspaper. Do you feel the same way that Representative Jennings did when he said that?
Well, I can't speak for Representative Jennings.
But do you feel the same way that he does?
I don't judge Mvskoke media on one story.
Gotcha. I
judge them upon their ability to be professionals and apply standards in their judgment every day, and that's what I'll continue to do.
What would you say to? Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, what I would say to, what would you say to a journalist that's employed at the Nation right now, when they're asked to violate those standards by someone in the chain of command above them? What would you tell them to do? Should they just be fired and walk away, and then the story's not aired? Where can they go?
I would tell them the same thing I would tell a healthcare worker who's treating a patient, that you do the right thing. You've been trained. You're a professional. You know the professional standards. Apply those in your job, and you will have no problem.
So, but in that scenario, there, the citizens would never know about the story that was recorded.
Just as they do in healthcare, we don't tell them every little piece of what goes.
Well, but the objective in healthcare isn't to tell the truth to all the citizens. The objective in healthcare is to provide the best healthcare for that particular citizen.
The best experience from providing the best healthcare possible.
Right, but the function of the news agency isn't to provide the best experience for people. It's to provide them with the truth, and the truth can sometimes be painful.
I understand that, but again, they're trained professionals, and they apply the judgment. I think they'll be fine.